This is a good bill that the Minister's put forward. I recommend this bill to the House.
Dr. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's so much here that 2 or 3 members of the opposition have talked about that I could spend the next hour taking each one of those things to task. But let's just start with this, Mr. Speaker. Why did Phil Hitley lose his job? Why did he lose his job, Mr. Speaker? Because it was no good. It was no good. And today he asks us, he reminds us about those gang members in state houses. I asked Honourable Annette King, where are those?
Point of order. Simon O'Connor.
I believe he's trying to huff and puff and blow the House down. Just wish he would quieten a bit for hearing's sake.
Order. It's not helpful. It's not a point of order.
Well, that member is never helpful, and neither is that other person.
Order.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Members should not assume things. I call now Dr. Rajan Prasad.
On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we're just so good at anticipating, so my apologies. But I want to ask Annette King, Honourable Annette King, where are those gang people that Phil Hitley tried to eject? They are still in the state houses. They have not left. That's where they are. So here he is, and that member was the Minister for Housing. It was very interesting what he tried to do. He was the person who coined the term that this was the Labour government was slum landlords. That was his entire housing policy. Entire housing policy, and no wonder he got the sack. No wonder he got the sack. And then he said, well, let's kind of put some more light bulbs in and things like that. Not build houses, nothing like that. No real appreciation of the problem of those who are not housed. So Phil Hitley was one, gone. And then Honourable Annette King, as a spokesperson for housing, and the wonderful Phil Hitley, Phil Twyford, began to really develop a housing policy that had some resonance. A housing policy that people out there began to say, look, this makes sense. This is what we need to do. All of a sudden, they fired Phil Hitley. They brought in the next spin merchant, the current Minister of Housing. And that's all that minister's been doing. He's going to go. He's going to go. Absolutely. It must be his time to go. But of course, I want to remind all those 3 members who spoke who are still in the House. The last person who spoke, my friend Melissa Lee, it was the National Party that sold 13,000 houses in the 1990s. 13,000 state houses in the 1990s. Didn't build, just sold. That is a curse of that particular ideology that side of the House internalises. So really, when it comes to housing and housing program, it's about building. It's about working with a lot of people. And it's about making sure that we actually give people a hope. And now they all of a sudden they're interested, but the 2 bills they brought, one was to bully the councils, particularly Auckland Council, about the accords, and if you don't do it, we will make you do it, was what they said, Mr. Speaker. But here we are. So here is, say that again so I can respond. Well, I'm telling you, it's Auckland, it's the Auckland Council. Well, I asked the Honourable Chris Tremaine to go back and read that bill because there is an override provision. That's how that bill would override the council. They would bully them. It's called the override provisions, Mr. Tremaine. I don't think that member knows that other act we passed because if he did, he would not be raising those rather inane points. But he's gone to, well, he's definitely gone. He's definitely gone. But honourable retirement, I think it was. But the other point I wanted to make was this, that the renewable tenancies, you know, it all sounds very good. And if it was that good, it would be widely supported. I say to members opposite, be very cautious with renewable tenancies, because the system that's designed in this bill is a blunt instrument, Mr. Ngaro. It is a blunt instrument, and the member should recognise it, because that member's own people will suffer as a result of what this particular bill is going to do with it. Because this will be the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable will be assessed every year, and who will they be? There'll be the vulnerable, there'll be the elderly, and these are easy pickings, Mr. Ngaro, easy targets. And of course, this government does not have any development plans. It really just goes for the easy targets. This is another version of their punitive approach to welfare. That's what it is. Now, if the government was really concerned that there are a number of people who are taking advantage of the housing system, they would come up with a well-thought-out proposal that could really begin to say, well, let's go and have a look at those, let's see who they are, and let's see if we can enable them to buy the house, get into a home, etc. This side of the house would not object to that at all, because that would mean people being housed in their own homes. That's what the decent society does, Mr. Ngaro. So, Mr. Speaker, there is so much I could go on about in this particular bill. That side has not made the argument. This is another punitive piece of legislation. Of course, we'll have to come back in government after November next year, almost a year from today, and fix these things up, Mr. Ngaro. As I said, that's what we'll have to do. With that note, sir, I'll take my... Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Great speech.
Mike Sabin.
Mr. Speaker, it's very hard to follow such a commanding performance from my